You're listening to the No Schedule Man podcast with Kevin Bulmer, exploring real stories and lessons learned with a variety of special guests. To learn more about Kevin and to access other episodes of the podcast, please visit noscheduleman.com and connect and contribute at NoScheduleMan on Twitter or Instagram and on Facebook, YouTube, and SoundCloud, all /NoScheduleMan. Thanks for listening and enjoy the No Schedule Man podcast.
I've been known to struggle with reality.
Hi, I'm Kevin Bulmer. Thanks for finding us and taking some time to listen. This podcast is here to explore personal development and to show you that you can achieve and grow and expand into your potential. And we do that by discovering and sharing the stories of real people who have done or are doing what I've just described. And for this episode, I guess I'm going to use myself as a bit of an example. See, this one's kind of personal for me. When I first decided to go ahead with creating and producing this podcast, today's guest, Kevin O'Hara, was the person that I wanted to have on here the most. When I was going through a really difficult time in my life, I came across Kevin online, and things began to change for the better in immeasurable ways since I started following along with what he was doing. I'll tell you exactly how I first found him. I believe the phrase I typed into Google was, "How to stop drinking alcohol." And before I knew it, I was watching some Irish guy who lived in Spain talking into a camera about how he'd quit drinking and how he was getting along each week. I watched Kevin go from a self-described drunk to a person who was getting healthier and growing a following, helping other people from all around the world, people like me. He was in Spain, still is. I'm in Canada. And then he was expanding his own horizons into creating videos, writing books, creating a video course, hosting a podcast, and devoting his life to something that he was passionate about doing. Now, even when I was still in the habit of drinking beer regularly, I kept Kevin's voice in my ear. Something told me that it would have an effect over time, and eventually it did. But this is about far more than trying to give up a habit like, in this particular case, drinking alcohol. See, I felt inspired by what Kevin was doing. I still am. Somewhere along the way, a light went off for me where I thought, if he can just be genuine and brave enough to put himself out there and reach and inspire people like me in the process, how am I any different? And why can't I do that? I decided, at the very least, I could try. Now, back at that time, I was really not in a very good place. My self-esteem was wobbly at best. I was still fairly emotionally raw from a divorce, not in the best of health, had big patches of hair that just sort of randomly fell off my head. Everybody just kept telling me it was due to stress. What I can tell you is that I sort of looked like a Holstein cow in reverse. It wasn't fun. I was in a job that I was decent at, but that brought on a lot of anxiety. There were a lot more negative voices in my head each day than positive ones. And I'd come home at night and I'd reach for a beer to try and quiet those voices down. And I honestly had been doing that for a long time. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, and I'll tell you that I felt this overwhelming sense of despair that I would never reach my potential or live the life I thought I was going to when I was younger. I felt like I'd run out of time, like I'd played all my cards, lost, and that maybe I was destined to just tread water for the rest of my days. But one little step at a time, that started to change. Looking back, I feel like I'm an entirely different person now than I used to be, and I think I've kept most of the good stuff, but have let go of or have changed so much of what wasn't serving me well, and then I'll keep working on the rest. Now, my guest today, Kevin O'Hara, has done exactly that by building a site called alcoholmastery.com. He's created countless videos, written the books How to Stop Drinking Alcohol, Alcohol Freedom, and Hang Loose Without Booze, Volumes 1 and 2. And in fact, at the time of this recording, Kevin's offering both Hang Loose volumes as ebooks at no charge when you sign up to his email newsletter, which I subscribed to a long time ago. Kevin's also created his first video course, also called How to Stop Drinking Alcohol, and it's available online now. Now, this episode is not a how-to for quitting drinking. I want you to know that right off the bat. It's not meant to hammer you over the head with an anti-alcohol message, though I will tell you that I did make the choice that it was no longer for me. It's been a year since I made that choice. I am proud of it, and I've not had a single regret about it. But in my opinion, it's about something more than that. Whether you have a difficult relationship with alcohol or not, I think you're going to get a lot from this discussion. Think about if you have anything in your life that you're trying to overcome. It could be a fear of intimacy. It could be smoking, being in a job that you don't like, maybe having a difficult time communicating with friends or a family member or your partner. Friends, this is all the same stuff. It's about the power of building awareness and accountability, like an accountable awareness, not judgmental, but just knowing that it's there and being honest with yourself. And then creating a process where you can start to visualize and map out what you do want as opposed to what you don't, and then start moving forward one step at a time to be able to achieve that and build yourself a better life. So here are what I feel are the key takeaways from my visit with Kevin O'Hara, which you're going to hear in just a moment. Number one, you can be an inspiration and make a difference to other people just by being who you are. You don't have to be a celebrity, some kind of actor or actress or musician or sports figure to be able to make an impact in someone else's life. Be who you are. Work at becoming the best version of that. And you're going to be amazed at how many people you can touch that way. And you're going to enjoy your own life more in the process. Number two, you can change. Just because you've been the same way for a long time, or you've been caught in a certain rut for years or even decades, or you're even feeling kind of hopeless like I just described that I was not all that long ago, that doesn't mean that you can't take control of it and improve your situation. It may be some sort of health concern, a habit, attitude, maybe your level of income, your occupation, or even your overall feeling about life. See, I found Kevin at one of my lowest points in my life, and he helped to light a fire under me just by being who he was, and he didn't even know it. Well, then I made the choice to make my life better. I rolled up my sleeves and started working at it, sort of like he was doing. And you'll hear in this conversation that the two of us are far beyond where we used to be, and I want to leave you with that as well. You can change. And number three, just get started and keep moving forward. You're going to figure things out as you go. If you're waiting for the perfect time or expecting things to be just exactly right out of the box, you're going to be waiting forever while life just passes you by. Get moving. You'll figure it out. You're going to be amazed what you learn and what you'll find that you're actually capable of. But you have to get started, and you've got to be willing to keep putting one foot in front of the other. Keep those lessons in mind and see if you can hear where those and some other real great gems come out in this conversation. I hope you enjoy listening to it as much as I enjoyed being a part of it. Here's my chat with one of my genuine heroes, Kevin O'Hara of Alcohol Mastery, on the No Schedule Man podcast. I've been wanting to ask you, Kevin, if you could take me inside your thoughts from back at the time where you're deciding, all right, I'm going to give up alcohol for good. Now, that's one of the monumental challenges that people will face. But then somehow you also got it through your head of, I think I'm also going to put myself on video when I'm at my most vulnerable and then share that with the world and see what happens. What can you tell me about what was going through your head at that time?
Well, I've been working for a while online. I was writing articles for just different places, Odesk mainly. And I was seriously considering putting some YouTube videos up and trying to learn more about YouTube. And that just happened to coincide with quitting drinking. And to be honest, Alcohol Mastery was just the website. It was just part of that experiment. I didn't really think that anything much would come out of it, So, I felt a bit weird putting them up, but at least it was something that I could talk about with some conviction. So that's how it started off.
Was there an accountability factor in that?
Sort of, yeah. It was not with the alcohol. The accountability.
Like a self-accountability. I'm trying to think of, I've done only a couple of videos on completely unrelated topics, where I just feel like an absolute goof, talking into a camera. So to me, I've always been fascinated by your decision not only to do that, but to stick to it. And I also wondered if you thought, even if I don't know if anybody's picking this up and watching it on YouTube or anywhere else, it's a commitment I've made to myself that I'm going to come back and I'll be able to see the progress. Or were you even thinking of it at that level at that time?
Not at the beginning. I mean, when I was just looking at the YouTube stats earlier, and I didn't start the YouTube channel until the 27th of January of that year. So that's 2013. And I'd already given up on the second. So the idea was, at the beginning was just to goof off in front of the camera and to see basically if I could do it and, how much I could improve over time. And as the time went on and I started getting responses, then it started to become more of a challenge for me to put out, well, this is what I'm doing this week and this is how I feel. And so I suppose, and over the years, it's definitely become an accountability thing. Definitely. I can't say that if I wasn't doing this, I'd be back on the alcohol, because my reasons for starting off were nothing to do with this, they were all to do with my son. So, that was it,
At what point in that process did you start getting the idea that people were tuning into it and reaching out to you and relating to you?
When I was getting responses on from the YouTube channel, basically, I had analytics installed on the website, so I could see that there was actually people coming to the website, and then you've got the analytics on YouTube. But it was the comments and people saying, "Yeah, Jesus, you're helping me, and I like what you're saying, and this is what I'm going through too, and I sound a lot. What you're going through is what I'm going through." That was the thing that sort of switched me onto it and made me, gave me the idea to do it more.
So you said that you were just kind of, I think you said goofing off in front of the camera was kind of your idea to at least get yourself started. What else were you thinking, though, in terms of blog, website? Because it did evolve. When you look back, it evolved quickly. But, of course, when you're living it, it's sort of one piece at a time. But what were the building blocks that you had in your mind when you started out and then within that first, say, 2 or 3 months?
Well, I'd had previous websites. I had one website because we were moving to Spain, and to learn more about Spain, I decided to create a website on that. The website's gone now because it was all based on AdSense, and that was just writing articles for the sake of writing articles, putting them up, and then seeing if you could get anything from the AdSense. But this one was sort of at the beginning, I didn't really have an idea where it was going, and I think it's just gradually evolved as the more I've got into it, and just trying to think of how better I can present things. And I'm still learning loads. I'm still only an amateur. And the same with video. You were saying earlier on that you feel weird in front of the camera. I still feel weird. None of that changed for me. So so it's just. I like the walking. I feel much more comfortable when I'm doing the walking videos than standing in front of a camera at home. I bought a nice camera, and I bought some lights, and that I think that just shines more of a spotlight on you. And when I'm out walking, it's a lot more free and it's a lot more natural. You're in a natural environment. The sun's there. You don't need any lighting, and the camera's shaking all over the place, but it's the message more than anything that gets across, So, yeah.
I've had where I've been watching those videos when you're out walking, and one of my sons come into the room and go, "What's he doing? Where's he going?" I'm like, "Well, he's walking. He's hiking through the woods. It's good for you." Oh, well, I suppose that's probably good. And he says, "Well, what has he got? Like a camera person in front of him, or?" And I said, "Well, I never really thought of that, but I just assumed that he's got some sort of a boom hanging over his head and pointed back at him, or some sort of a GoPro or something." But
yeah,
is it something like that?
No, it's a selfie stick. I mean, I bought. It was actually I was looking on eBay for something completely different.
Yeah.
And I came across this selfie stick, and I thought, what's such a great idea. And that, everyone's got a selfie stick now. It's like stick it on. But the first camera I had was an iPhone 4. And that just, I mean, I thought the videos were brilliant, except for the shaking. You can't stop the shaking. I've got a Samsung now, and this has got stabilization technology in it. But I think that just looks as weird, because the background stays the same, but you're still moving forwards. But that's all it is. It's just a selfie stick. Yeah. I wish there was a person in front of me walking backwards.
Well, but I don't know, more to manage, Kev. But it's a couple of good lessons in there. One is that we always think that a situation has to be perfect, or we need to wait for the time to be right before we do something or make a change. And the change is what you make it. And you always have tools to work with, but sometimes you need to change your perspective in terms of what your expectations are of what you're working with. So whether we're talking about changing a habit like alcohol, or even, and I want this discussion to get into this, but as we go forward, but starting and then letting a process evolve and letting yourself evolve. I'll use the videos as an example, Kevin, in that I remember them starting where it was just basically you sitting in what looked like in an apartment, not really looking all that happy, probably because of the way you were feeling back at that time. And that's not even fair to say not looking happy, but just, looking like somebody who had that regular habit that he was trying to get away from, to graduating to where you're on the balcony overlooking the water, to next thing you know, you're exercising and moving along, to now what you described where the quality has jumped up, at least in terms of how it looks, no less in the content, or more in the content, which has always been terrific in my opinion. But that's part of the process, isn't it, Kevin? To just get started and not expect everything to be perfect right out of the gate, but just get some forward momentum going, and then let it evolve. Is that a fair way to assess kind of how you've handled this?
It's the whole thing. I mean, if you you need to start, you need to sort of make a fool out of yourself, if you like, in the beginning, and just try. I mean, I think it's the same. A lot of people don't quit drinking, for instance, because they feel that they're waiting for the perfect time, and you just never find the perfect time for anything in life. The thing is, and the older I get, the older anyone gets, I presume that the more they see the truth in that. You've more time behind you than you have in front of you. You never know what time you've got in front of you. But I think if you can, no matter what tools you've got to start any process, there's nothing better than experience of actually doing something to teach you what you need to learn, basically. So that's, I love doing, I've sort of loved every minute of the videos. There's lots of the whole process of building a website and trying to market it and, doing all that. There's a lot of rubbish side of it that I hate doing, but the video side of it is brilliant. I mean, I've always liked that. So yeah, I mean, even though I feel uncomfortable doing it, it's something that I feel that's sort of evolved with me as I've gone on,
When you do when you do those talks, Kev, especially in the first year or so, for an example, the ones where you're walking along, you're taking us on the hike, using the selfie stick and giving us lessons. How much of what you were talking about is planned out?
I think what I've done, I mean, a lot of the stuff that I've done in the studio, I've tried to script out a lot of it, and I think that's why I feel uncomfortable with it. Most of the stuff when I'm walking is sort of I have maybe 5 or 6 pointers, and then the rest of it just comes naturally, And I think that's why a lot of people like the hiking videos more than they do the other ones. So yeah, it depends. But I feel that if I'm in the studio, I can get my point across. I can get more. Sort of. What would you say? It's more precise in what I want to say.
No,
I was going to say it probably serves a different purpose now that we've evolved, or you've evolved into the video courses and things like that. But we'll come toward that. I have written down here SDA 62. I want you to know that I've got the audio of that video on my iPod, and I listen to it every once in a while. And even though there's a word in there that's probably pronounced the way you say it, more like 3 O's as opposed to the UC in the middle. But my kids have heard it, and they know exactly who you are. And you'll hear them literally saying, "Awesome, man, awesome." It's become a catchphrase in our house between my 2 sons and I. But that's the video where you talked about the commitment that when you're trying to give up alcohol, that you know that it's got to happen, that once you get to that 1 year mark, which I'm just about to come out to, that it's awesome. And and it's burned into my brain, Kevin. It's awesome, man. It's awesome. I tell you, I can hear your voice. And then you said, there's 2 paths your life can go. One way where you stop drinking, where it's going to be awesome, or the other way where you keep drinking and basically your life is fucked. It's kind of how it sounds. And there's something about that one I've gone back to over and over and over, and then there are 2 more that I want to point out to you. But it's funny because after you say that, then it cuts away, and then you come back and go, anyway, that was a bit of a rant and a half. But look, come on over to the forums. It's growing there. I'm not even really asking a question so much as just relating something that I wanted to tell you. But there have got to be some moments in there, in some of the different videos that you've heard from people like me to say, hey, that one really resonated with me. Or I really got this out of that. What does that feel like for you to be able to hear that feedback when you're just kind of continuing on the journey that you've just described?
Awesome. Yeah, that's the best feeling, is when somebody says that they've got something personal out of a particular video. I mean, sometimes it's hard. I had a guy once saying to me in the comments on YouTube that he didn't he liked what I was saying, but he didn't like all the talk about Jesus and stuff. So I was, what? I never talk about that, So I had to go back over the video. And it's an Irish saying. It's when you're, as instead of saying any other swear word, you go, oh, Jesus. And it was like I said, da, 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 Jesus. And then this will help you, So he obviously thought that I was talking about Jesus will save you, And it's those moments as well as the other ones that give me, but definitely when somebody like yourself says, that they've got a particular thing out of a video. Yeah, there's nothing else. There's no better feeling, I think, to know that people are being helped, There's 2 more then that I'd like to mention to you, Kevin, is, because I know that we've got some people, we're connected to a lot of the same people, that'll probably listen to this discussion, and I hope so. Some of them that have found their legs and others that are still struggling, that getting alcohol or any other addiction, and we could do several hours of conversation on whatever those things could be, but getting those things free from your life is an important part of the puzzle, but it's just part of the puzzle, I think. A big part, but there are so many other elements to it. And I was going through a time in my life where I was really struggling for a lot of reasons, and I'd kind of lost my confidence and didn't have a lot of self-esteem. And there are 2 videos, and I've tried to go back and find them, and I can't, I haven't been able to so far. But one of them was when you mentioned a series of different books that you'd read. And I thought you'd find this funny to hear, because if I remember correctly, you actually came back and said, I in one of the following videos, I don't really know that I'm going to follow up and do any more of that. But there was one video that you went over a few books, and in that you mentioned a book called The Magic of Thinking Big, by David J. Schwartz, and how it had helped you, and a few others. And I can't remember the others, but I remember that one, and I'm going to come back to that in a second. The other one was, at least it included you talking about, and I'm thinking you were probably between the 1 and 2 year mark of being free from alcohol at this point, Kevin, but you got talking more about goals and what you wanted to do with your life. And I'm paraphrasing, of course, but
I remember you saying something like, you know, I'm feeling like I've got the rest of my life ahead of me and I've got things that I want to do. I remember you saying that you'd worked in the forestry and that you've been doing writing, but that what you really wanted to do was to be one of the world's foremost leaders, or to be recognized that way. My words, not yours here. Again, I'm paraphrasing, but to help people overcome addiction or get away from alcohol. And I remember you saying something like, yeah, you know, some people might think that sounds crazy, but it's what I want to do, and it's what I'm going to want to work toward. And when I fast forward a couple of years later from when I found that to where you are now, having a few books out, offering video courses, having helped people all around the world, such as myself, and I've got contacts literally all over the world that know who you are, that have made a decision to be able to improve their lives, that were sparked by you. And back to the book that you recommended, I went and I read it, and then I just did everything in it that it said to do. And I've read all sorts of personal development books before that and since. But a funny thing happened, Kevin, is that things started to change for me from that point. Yeah. And from when you talked about the goals, I remember thinking, you know, and I don't mean any disrespect, but if some bloke from Ireland who moves to Spain, who just decided he wanted to goof off in front of the camera when he decided to quit drinking, can just do that and be himself and inspire somebody like me who's halfway around the world, why can't I do that? And it was as simple a thought shift as that. And then I started thinking, well, one of these habits that's slowing me down and getting in the way is coming home every night and reaching for a Bud Light. But when I started to think about it in terms of here's what I want to do with the runway that I might have in front of me with my life, as opposed to what I was trying to get away from, everything shifted for me. And I keep thinking back to those two videos where you referred that book and you talked about your goals. Now I need to be able to dig them up because, of course, I'm going to have to post the links when we post this podcast. What do you remember of that discussion about when you were talking about, here's what I want to do, like basically stating your goals on the video? Do you remember that?
I do. I remember exactly where I was as well when I was saying it. I was coming down off one of the hills. That was something that I would, if I to restate it now, I don't think I'd put it in such that I want to be a leading, but I want to be a force for trying to get alcohol out of people's lives, especially young people. I think the more I look at alcohol advertising, marketing, the more I see it aimed not towards people who are already sitting on the bar stools, are already going into liquor stores and buying their alcohol, but exactly the same thing as what the cigarette companies were doing. They're trying to get people as young as possible to start the whole process rolling in their own lives, you know. And it's such a destructive, not just the alcohol. I mean, I'm sort of, you know, moving away from thinking of alcohol as being the problem, that it's the whole lifestyle, it's the whole thinking about, you know, how people think, how they think about getting their, how they think about socializing, relaxing, and all comes together in just one screwed up way of thinking about things, you know. And there's so much more to life than that. And if I could change that one statement, it would be, you know, I want to encourage more and more young people to stay away from this. I think it's happening. I think more and more young people are heading in sort of the right direction. They're not going into, because they see the damage that's happening, you know, that's being caused. I think Facebook is a good way, in one way of seeing all that, because they see all their friends, and, you know, you post up photographs on Facebook and they're there for forever, basically, you know. So, and on the other hand, you get alcohol companies that are, advertising deals on Facebook, and, you know, there's no way of, stopping children from seeing them, let alone teenagers who can go out and, buy this stuff. So yeah, that's from that point of view. I think I still have, you know, I have a lot of ambition in this in this field, and I would like to sort of leave my marks, to speak. So yeah, as the book, I think the book. What was the book again? I can't remember the name of it.
Well, the book that I just referred to?
Yeah.
The Magic of Thinking Big by David J. Schwartz.
Yeah, Schwartz. Yeah, that was the first book I ever read, the first self-help book that I ever read. And it was, I remember my father was unemployed back in the UK when we were living in England. And for some reason, he was trying to get some sales work, and this couple came around, a real smooth couple, and they had their whiteboard with them, and they were trying to sell. It was a pyramid scheme that they were trying to get my dad involved in. And one of the things that they left behind, along with all this other bump, this load of brochures and stuff, was this book, David Schwartz. And my dad threw all this stuff into the corner, and I picked up this book. And it was literally the first self-help book or that kind of genre that I ever read. And I never really I put some of the stuff into practice. I mean, I think when you're reading stuff like that, you have no choice, but some of it sinks into your brain. But I think it was only really after I'd stopped drinking and I was really starting to get into trying to improve myself big time that I went back to that book and read it again. And I think it was one of the first books that I went back to. And I think it's just that had a profound effect on the way I looked at myself as well, on my self-confidence and my outlook in life, my expectations, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Well, and for me, there's nothing, with due respect to the author, especially innovative or profound about the contents of that book. The similar stories have been told, I don't know how many times over in other different forms, books, films, whatever. But for me, I mean, that was the right one at the right time. And it's funny how that ends up happening. But I think it comes back to, and tying in with what you were just saying, it comes back to choosing for yourself, as opposed to just kind of blindly following this script that we grow up thinking is the way to live. And when you start to understand, I have the opportunity to choose the way I want to think and the way I want to act and what I want to do, it's a shame that that's so scary, that our default is set to just kind of follow, just into all these mousetraps. But, and alcohol is one of them. But gosh, once you start waking up, you start seeing, just becoming a lot more aware of how other people's words, your own words, thoughts, energies are affecting you. You start becoming a lot more aware of where you want to be and where you don't.
Absolutely.
What you're doing with your body, what you're putting into it, how you're feeling. And that plays back to the evolution, I think, that we're talking about. And maybe to what I was saying is that if you want to take an addiction out of your life, alcohol being maybe one of the polarizing ones, obviously, that we can be talking about. It's a big, important piece. But it's just a piece. The larger puzzle is being brave enough to choose how you want to live your life. Do you think it's fair to say that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think your mental framework, your attitude. I mean, there's, when you say about the Schwartz's book, I mean, there's an old one, The Positive Mental Attitude, which I think that goes back to the 50s. And then there's books from Napoleon Hill and, people that go back before the last century that are saying the same things, that it's all personal choice, that, it's so easy to get stuck into a rut and a habit and to just get drawn in by other people and what they want and, get drawn into that kind of a life. I mean, I think Alcohol Anonymous and groups like that, not just them. I mean, I don't want to single out those people, but I think the alcohol quit industry is sort of growing in size the more, the more alcohol there is out there. And, they've got a vested interest in putting alcohol front and center in front of everyone and saying, well, this is your problem, you know, and it's not the problem. I mean, this is what we focus on. And when we focus on that, then when you go out, then everybody else, you say, well, I'm drinking, and they say automatically, well, think, are you an alcoholic, you know? And it's, you know, it's bullshit. It's only a small part of the problem, you know. The rest of it is exactly what you're still doing, you know, going out into, while you're watching other people drinking and sort of, I remember, you know, the first few weeks just being so envious of people throwing down the wine and the beer and stuff. And then gradually, as I move forward, thinking, you know, this, in reality, this is only rotten grape juice, you know. You know, and it's not even the feeling. I didn't miss the taste of it. You know, I missed the habit. You know, it was just, this is what I always did. And I felt naked without it, you know, sort of, you know. So yeah, and once you start about it, and as you say, once you start opening your mind up to these things, you start to see the problems stretch further than that. I mean, when I stopped, when I was drinking, my hangovers used to go over and sort of, they'd be stretching out into 2 or 3 days. But it wasn't just that; it was the overall feeling that I had in my body, and it was sort of, the alcohol was the pervasive toxin. So it was only when I stopped drinking that I started to feel what it was like not to go out walking then, if I didn't go out walking, or not to be fully hydrated. So when I drank enough water then, I felt what it was like to be fully hydrated. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do.
Because when you're drinking alcohol, it masks so many other things underneath you because it's such an overwhelming toxin, you know. So that when you do stop, you start noticing all these other things that you can change. And then you start changing those. And, you know, it's like, somebody was once, I don't know where I read this, about the foundational, you can build a core habit. And that one core habit, say exercise or one of those things, and that one core habit becomes the foundation for building more better habits, you know, more positive habits in your life. And I think that's one of the quitting alcohol is one of those things that once you get rid of that, that's the foundation for uncovering so many other things in your life. Yeah, it's a weird thing, yeah.
It's interesting when you talk about the feeling of, I think you said being naked at first when you stop drinking and everybody else is. That kind of gets right back to what I was alluding to earlier. Is that's the feeling that you have whenever you break away from the herd. That regardless of whether or not those people know where they're going, as soon as you disengage autopilot, you think, oh, gee, you know, I'm responsible and I've got to be content enough within my own mind and heart at what I'm doing that, you know, because we know how people are. And I'm not saying that they're always wrong, Kevin, but I think you know what I'm getting at is it's just this, certainly here in North America, this popular culture autopilot.
Yeah.
And when you disengage from that, even though your heart and your soul is telling you that's the right thing to do for you, it's really scary at first. And the only way through it is to trust yourself and ride it out. But when you do, those lights start going on, like what you're saying about, oh, now I see what it feels like, you know, to be hydrated, to exercise. And then the other light bulbs start coming on of, I wonder if I could do this, or I wonder if I could do that. Like, for instance, you had been doing the videos for a while, unless I'm getting the timing wrong. And then all of a sudden, the book comes along, How to Stop Drinking Alcohol. What was the process in your mind? How did that evolve to where you got to where you thought, okay, I've been writing, as you described a little while ago, but now I'm going to apply those skills toward actually putting a book together. What was in your mind back then?
I think I'd always wanted to be a writer. That was my thing. I wanted to write science fiction from when I was young. So that process was the need to do that was always there, so to say. And, writing the articles before I started the website and doing the videos was sort of an expansion of that. So it was a natural progression for me to go back to the writing. I mean, I think I always feel more comfortable when I'm in front of a screen writing than I do in front of the camera, although I love doing the videos. So, yeah, and I was listening to a lot of podcasts on self-publishing, and I realized it was a lot easier to get a book published nowadays. It's a lot easier to find the market for the book, once you had people who liked what you said. So that was just, it took me a couple of months to write the first draft for the book, but the first book was only based on what I'd already said over the year. I think it was a year and a half after I stopped that I started writing the first book. So yeah, it was, that's basically the process that I went through. And then, I like writing. So, but, that's another process that you start off in baby steps and you work your way up,
What else was going on in your life at that time? Were you still working for the forestry at that point?
No, because we moved to Spain the year before I stopped. And I gave up forestry in Ireland that year that we moved. So I was writing for a full year before I stopped drinking. Like I say, I was writing articles and I had a few of my own websites. And, so at that stage I was really doing, I think by that stage I still had a couple of clients that I was writing for. And then once the book came out, and I think I was I did the audio book then that year. And it was only then that I started thinking, well, I can do this full time, really. So, yeah, I mean, I had a bit of money left over from Ireland, so I was living on that at the time. So, yeah, that was one of the stories of I was trying to get a new client with Odesk, and I was talking to this guy, this Israeli guy who had a website, and it was sort of pop psychology. And he was talking about, do you have any previous experience? So I pointed him to the website and I said, yeah, this is what I do now, So, and I said, yeah. So he said, well, definitely like your writing and, you could do this for us or that for us. But, I have to ask you a question. I said, what? He says, well, what are you going to do about your drinking and stuff? And I says, well, what do you mean by drinking? I don't drink anymore, He says, I haven't drank in a year and a half. He said, yeah, but, is this going to interfere? I said, well, how can it interfere? But beforehand, if I'd have told you, before I'd stopped drinking, that would definitely have interfered, when I was drinking. But now there's no problem, I don't drink anymore. I'm never going to drink anymore. So, but that's the perception, isn't it,
I haven't had to face that. Only, well, this is the first time I've talked publicly about, any intention of, people that are in my life, they know that I put it down. Nobody ever looked at me, I don't think, Kevin, as anybody who ever had a problem, he says with quotes around it.
Yeah.
I just wasn't happy with the habit. It bothered me that it took so much energy to not come home and reach for a beer. And that I could go without it, but it really took some effort. And that bothered me. And this, now I guess I'm rewinding us back to where we were a few minutes ago. But this is one of the big things that people have to face. And so maybe it's worth talking about that. I mean, even going to my doctor, there were 2 or 3 different times where I had talked to my doctor. See, and I want to talk about this. It doesn't interfere with work, never interferes with my kids. I've never got behind the wheel of a car, but, I come home most nights, and that's the first thing that I reach for. And I think, okay, I'm going to be out by the barbecue, have a beer. I'm going to relax, have a beer. If I've had a bad day, have a beer.
Yeah.
And I don't like that. And I remember specifically my family doctor a couple of times saying that doesn't really sound like it's much of an issue. I remember going away from that thinking, I wonder what he's doing when he goes home.
Yeah.
And I love my doctor. But it really came back to me having to decide where I wanted my life to go, to make that decision of like, you know what, if I don't need this right now, I just don't really need it ever. And when I finally got it in my mind, if I don't drink alcohol, as almost overly simplistic as that sounds, that's the shift that it took. I had tried and gone back and tried and gone back. And you do a month and then you go, well, I'm going to weddings, so I'll join the toast. Or you do, 6 weeks and then you're out with the buddies. And then it just keeps perpetuating until you finally get to a point where you're thinking, well, you know what? I actually, regardless of the sideways looks or when, you go, because Kevin, this past February, I was at an all-inclusive resort. And when I say all-inclusive, liquor was literally flowing out of the taps. And I remember thinking before that, how do I do that without having at least something to drink? And I actually allowed that to take up a lot of energy until I got there. And I realized, well, I'm the same me here that I am at home. I don't drink alcohol. So I would go to the bar and I'd get 4 or 5 drinks for everybody else. And I'd bring back a water or a 7-Up.
Yeah.
It was easy. And for a while, people look at you kind of sideways. But once you realize that you just don't care, they lose interest and they stop bringing it up, yeah. I guess. But I suppose that partly goes down to how you handle that too, wouldn't you say? Like,
yeah, definitely.
If you're preaching to people, they're going to get tired of you. But if you're just living your life and staying in your lane and not telling other people how to live their life,
yeah, exactly.
What's the harm?
I mean, I started out the first 2 months that I was off drinking. I think I was trying to tell everyone, the dangers of alcohol and stuff, anyone who'd listen anyway. But, I soon stopped that. But I think most people, when they, they're just as uncomfortable, you not drinking. I mean, you're part of their picture as a drinker. So when you don't drink anymore, it's sort of strange, isn't it, for everyone around you, I mean, I remember giving up for a year, about 5 years before I stopped permanently. And I was living back in Ireland and I really tried to my friends were all drinkers and we used to always meet up in the same bar, in the same corner of the bar, after work, not every day, but maybe 2 or 3 times a week, 4 times a week, maybe. And I tried to do that again and it was so boring. But they were so uncomfortable with the whole thing, because, they didn't like, when everyone's getting drunk and everyone's having a good time, nobody's going to remember it the next day, But when there's somebody there who's not drinking, they're only drinking water, then everyone else has to be sort of on their best behavior or try not to do anything too outrageous in case it's remembered the next day, So it was weird. It was the weirdest experience. And after 2 weeks of trying to do that, I just stopped. I mean, I couldn't do it. More out of my own boredom, But, I mean, you find then that, where I could drink 10 or 15 pints maybe of Guinness, there was no chance, no possibility on this planet that I could go anywhere near that in water or soft drinks, So I'd be sat there like an old lady sipping away on, and I just felt completely wrong, So, but they say, it's a person by their 5 closest friends, and that's who my friends were at the time. So, yeah.
That's a really important point, I think, because it's part of the evolution, in my opinion. And I don't know, we're so afraid of change, I think, as a society. But one of the things that I've really noticed, Kevin, is I'm a lot more hyper-vigilant about what I allow even into my field of awareness. I mean, you mentioned quickly Facebook earlier. I don't follow most of the people I'm connected to. I want to be connected to them because, I want to have a way to be able to get in touch with them. They're my friends and whatnot. But
yeah,
I don't want my energy tied up into political rantings and ravings or, oh, it's wine o'clock or, oh, here's my cat.
Absolutely.
Going to catch grief from any of my friends with that, or even
Yeah.
to the point where some radio shows and podcasts, some programs, and I've never been a big TV watcher, consumer, or anything like that, but things that I've enjoyed in the past, found or gained entertainment from, that I just don't consume anymore. I'll give you an example on that. Vacation that I was on in February, I was reading a book by a radio host whose program I've listened to for years. And I bought the book specifically to take with me on that vacation. And he's a guy who's fairly polarizing and goes on these, I guess I'll call them rants, but they're usually entertaining, and more often than not I agree with them. But in any event, I was reading the book and it was entertaining enough, but I became aware of the fact a couple of days into this trip that I didn't feel very good. Like it just, there was just something, oh, you're laughing. I'm guessing you can relate to where I'm going here.
Yeah.
And I decided, I was about halfway through it, and I put it down, and then I traded it for a book by Bob Proctor called The Art of Living.
Yeah.
And I started in on that, and before I was 2 pages into it, I was laughing and smiling, and my whole energy felt different. And by the time I got home from that vacation, I stopped downloading that radio host podcast. I still like him. It's just, I've changed. I don't want to, even when I agree with the ranting, I don't even want to invest my own attention and energy into something that's reinforcing and negative. Do you understand what I mean? And it's just part of the evolution, I think. And I wasn't like that before. I'd hoist another cold one and say, yeah, exactly. That's stupid. But you've got to be open, I think, to, and not be afraid of evolving, because there's a real good chance that you're going to like yourself better, but you've got to give yourself the opportunity to do that.
I think that is true. Yeah. I mean, when you're drinking, you're sort of clouding everything off. You're dropping all, they say you drop your guard, and my mind used to go back to being a teenager again, even worse than a teenager, because you're not really, I didn't anyway. I couldn't think straight, that kind of feeling, just, it permeates the rest of your days, even though you're not drunk anymore. I think the alcohol is still there, the influence is still there. The lifestyle is still affecting you. And definitely since I've stopped, and anybody I've talked to, that have been off, they've all achieved so much more once they've stopped poisoning themselves, stopped poisoning their brains more than anything else. I mean, regardless of what you do to your body, it's your brain that is it runs the show. It's your sort of you're piloting everything around from your brain. So if you're sort of shoving a basket over your head with alcohol every time, then, you can't see clearly, you don't know where you're going, you're walking around in circles. I mean, I've achieved more in the last 3.5 years than I have in the last 20 years. And everybody says the same thing. And only because they've sort of released themselves from the straitjacket, it's, an old thing, but hey, that's it.
Well, you talk about the basket being over your head and you don't know where you're going because of alcohol. I don't even think the alcohol doesn't necessarily help, depending on how much you're involved with. But I've come to feel a lot of us don't have any clue where we're going.
No, it's true, yeah.
And we're following a lot of people that also don't know, and listening to a lot of people that have really nothing of value to say. But it's difficult when if you really sit and think with your own thoughts and ask yourself that, what is it that I really want out of my life? You're not necessarily going to get the answers right away, because I think what's automatically going to come to you are expectations or comparisons about what you see other people doing, or celebrity life that's held up, or things that you should have or do. But and that might be right for you, but it might not. And finding that out, I think, could only be a process. I mentioned that the book that you did or that you covered in that one video. I'll mention one to you here now that was also a big part of the process. It's called 5 Wishes by a guy named Gay Hendricks. And in that book, he paints the scenario of talking to a guy at a dinner party and not liking being at these dinner parties and the inane babble that goes on, and that the two of them decided they were going to have a high-level conversation. And he said, okay, I'm up for that. So the fellow that he was talking to said, here's one for you. I almost died once, or I was dead, or something like that. And then that had the author's attention. And he said, then I got a question for you that I'm paraphrasing and not doing a very good job here, Kevin. But the question was, if all of a sudden if you can put yourself sort of on your deathbed, imagine that, which is where this guy was, and then had the opportunity to kind of look back at his life, and then he was granted a second life by living. If you can visualize and imagine yourself at the end of your life, whenever that might be, what are you going to look back on and regret or wish that you had done or not done? And if you really sit and think about that, at least for me, my mind just kind of went tilt.
Yeah.
Because the answers didn't all really come right away, but that combined with things like you doing the video of, here are some of the goals that I have and things that I think I can do and that I'm going to pursue. You might think it's crazy, but this is what I'm going to go and do. That started to change my thinking. And my actions started to change, including putting down beer for good, any alcohol for good.
Yeah.
And then I started moving in the direction of where I wanted to go, using you and others as a model, Kevin. And I'd like to take at least a few minutes to talk about some of what you've been able to accomplish. Like we mentioned the book, How to Stop Drinking Alcohol was the first book, at least on this subject, right?
Yeah.
So then what was the process after that that led into Alcohol Freedom and Hang Loose Without the Booze? How did that come about?
Well, the second book was really just to try and continue on with the first book, to try and, write about a different angle from what I'd written about in How to Stop Drinking Alcohol. Hang Loose Without Booze was sort of a free book that I wanted to give away, just to try and help people to see a different way of looking at life without alcohol. How do you relax without alcohol? How do you, there was the first 20 parts of that book were about nutrition, or the first 30 parts of it. I think that's a big part in progress, in progressing yourself. And then I can't remember what decision made me do the video course. I think I was trying to get a membership site going where I could put some private videos up and try and make a living. That was basically the idea of the video courses. But then I was talking to a guy, one of the editors for the books, and he was talking about somebody else who had gone down a similar line of attempting to construct a membership site, and he was suggesting putting individual products out there that just were about a specific need. So I think that's where the courses came from, whereas the two books were more general. And the first video course was based on the first book. It's got the same name, but the ones that I'm doing now are more specific. There's one coming out at the end of this month, which is about preparation. I think that's probably the most important part of anyone's journey, is getting themselves ready, getting their mind ready, their environment ready, the people around them, that kind of thing. So yeah.
How does one even attack putting together a video course?
The same way as I wrote a book haphazardly, in the beginning.
So instead of goofing off in front of the camera, well, I guess the video course is still part of that. But I guess that plays back into what we've kind of brought up several times here, right? You just start. I mean, I found a great tool called it's mind mapping. You've heard of mind mapping. It's
it's just setting out a structure. Free playing, I think, is the tool I use. And that's setting out a structure in just from where you're beginning, where you want to start to where you want to end up. And then, setting out in steps that you want to sort of cover along the way of the course. And then it's a gradual process. It's like anything in life. You have to do things one thing after another. There's no way of doing them, and I think this whole thing, me evolving, you evolving, it's like somebody once said that you can only think about the future in the mood that you're in at the moment. So if you're depressed and you think about the future, you're going to think about the future in a depressed way, even if you're thinking about positive things, there's still going to be the underlying depressive thing there. Whereas if you're in a happy mood, you're going to think about your future in the same way. And I think when people are, when you're thinking about, when you're quitting drinking, you're starting out as a drinker. All your thoughts are as the drinker in the environment of a drinker, with the people who are also drinkers. So it's very difficult to sort of get your mind outside of that. And the only way you can do it is by doing it, by stepping outside of your comfort zone and, hanging everything out for the world to see, and just whatever happens, happens, and that's the process that I'm using, to do anything is learning as I go along. YouTube is brilliant for that kind of thing. There's so much information. A lot of it's rubbish. You have to sort through and sift through because it's free. But so that's, it is just putting yourself out there and trying your best. But trying is the key word.
The fact that we're even having this conversation right now, it just kind of clued into, well, we're just a couple guys, right? And with the way that technology exists now, we can talk like this. We've got to coordinate our time zones. You're in Spain, I'm in Canada. But, Kev, I remember thinking, that's the guy that does the videos. That's the guy that writes the books. That's the guy that's half a world away. Like, he's in an entirely different reality than I am. That's the guy I look up to and that I rely upon to be a voice. But this is how I thought. And until you realize we're all just people, everybody just everything just starts with an idea. And one of the things, as a guy that was trained in the broadcasting field and spent a long time on the air, that I've wanted to do literally for years was to start a podcast, but that I would be like, well, where do you start? Yeah. And, I think it was coming back around Christmas time this past year that I finally made a decision, the turn of the calendar year, I'm going to get going. And I wrote down a whole bunch of people that I knew I would want to talk to. And your name was right at the top of that list. But even then, I told myself I had to work up to it. I have to get it going. I have to figure out what I'm doing. And, but you just start. And then all of a sudden, one foot goes in front of the other. And as cliche as it sounds, you figure things out as you go along. You find out what you're capable of. And you start connecting with other people and finding out, oh, they're just a person.
Exactly.
No worse or no better than I am. And 9 times out of 10, if you ask for help, people will be only too glad to help you along. Because most, right-thinking people want to help other people, I think. And anyway, I filled up a lot of this conversation with stuff that isn't exactly questions, but they are thoughts that I've wanted to share with you for quite some time. But tell me, before we wrap up, what are some of the things maybe that are still on your list of things that you'd like to go forward and explore in the next little while? I'd like to sort of do more podcasting. I'd like to interview more people, sort of get more people online. It's difficult because a lot of people don't want to sort of
come out and stand up, put their hands up and go, well, yeah, this is what my life has been like, and this is what my life is like now. I've changed, but so I'd like to do more of that. I want to write more books, and I keep doing what I'm doing with the video courses. I'm not sure. I mean, in the back of my head, I've got this thing about public speaking, but that is just, I'm not sure. Yeah, that would be a big step for me, and, I don't have a clear vision of it. So that's probably, one of the reasons why there's so much I think there's a block in front of me of doing any of that. So yeah, we'll see what happens.
So public speaking is something then that you're thinking might be on the horizon, but just doesn't quite feel part of the immediate vision. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I think, like you have to, I mean, it's not anywhere different to doing what I'm doing now or doing what I'm doing on the videos. It's just talking. But I think, there's a perception and an expectation about certain things, personal expectation that it's sort of, I don't know if it stopped me doing it, but, I think it's one of the biggest fears of many people is fear of public speaking, but only because they haven't done it, I think even the most seasoned actors say that they still feel ill when they have to go on stage and perform, so there's hope for everyone else.
Well, it's funny for me interesting for me to hear that, and that I aspire to do more of that as the years go by as well. But we talked earlier about the act of sitting in front of a camera and talking into it, and how unnatural that feels to me. Whereas you've expressed that you've enjoyed it, had to get used to the process, I guess, but have enjoyed it. Kevin, you can put me in front of thousands of people to MC or to speak or even sing, and I would just feel completely at home. And I don't know why that I'm like that, but I'm like that. But put me in front of one camera and I feel like a total goof. So it's almost the opposite. So maybe we can help each other out if and when that ever becomes part of what we want in our immediate future. But
when I first started doing the videos, I did this felt so strange, especially sat in the apartment, in my little office. And I got I had the camera set up on, like a stand for putting music scores on that
Sure.
You'd play. And I was learning to play the guitar years ago, but I still had this stand for some reason. The guitar was gone, and, my ambition to become a great guitarist had gone as well, but this stand was still there. So I had the iPhone set up on this, and I put a little photograph of my son right behind the lens, so I could still appear to be looking in the lens of the camera, but I was talking to him, and that made me feel so much more comfortable, than I was. And I think that gave me a lot more. So that was one of the tricks that I used in the beginning to just get that comfort feeling, to feel at ease with myself.
That's a neat trick and a good way to be able to tie it up, because you talked earlier about thinking about your son, and anyone that's watched any of your videos is familiar with that situation, and how the two of you enjoy spending time together whenever you can, and how important that is to you. And, and I mentioned quickly to you, Kevin, I've got two boys. They're now 13 and 10. And the three of us are a really close, tight unit. They know exactly who you are, and they know exactly why their dad watches your videos, reads the books. They've been a very active participant in this evolution of their father. Not because I'm trying to preach or anything like that, but just to say to them, hey guys, I want you to watch what I'm trying to do. Ask any questions that you have. There's no use in me pretending that these aren't things that are going to come into your field of awareness as you go forward. They are. You'll make your own choices. I just want you to understand what you saw your dad deal with. And that's been a really interesting thing and a really nice gift to be able to communicate that and let them participate. And I guess that's a choice as a parent. who knows how it will work out for them? Because again, I can't control that. I can only really control myself. Yeah. And I guess that's, coming back to where we started, that's kind of where it comes down to, right, Kev? It just, nothing changes without you choosing it.
Absolutely. I mean, it's always, if I could go back in time and do it all again, it's probably one of the main things that I'd change would be to steer my son away from that and, be a good role model in that aspect. And you can't do anything about it. The past is the past. So you have to go where you want. And my son now, he's always tells me how proud he is that I've stopped. And although he hasn't stopped drinking, he doesn't drink anywhere near what I used to drink. But I can see the positive moves that he's making in his own life. So I mean, absolutely. I think, like I say, this is one of the things that I try and focus my attention on. I want to focus my future attention on, is trying to prevent people from even starting on this, in this habit. So, and you're doing that now with your own kids. I think that's all you can do is guide, teach by guidance and teach by doing it yourself. You can't force anyone to take their own path in life, Yeah,
absolutely. Well, I'm grateful for it, Kevin, and I feel like we've barely skimmed the surface. I've always wanted to talk to you since I saw your first video, and it just so happens that people are going to, we're allowing other people to hear the conversation. So I haven't really dug in a whole lot to some of the specific products and other things like that. But maybe we can at another time. But in the meantime, as this podcast gets posted, I'll make sure that all the links to certainly the Alcohol Mastery and to the YouTube channel, and refer people to the video courses for anybody that's interested. I'm not doing this discussion to try to preach to anyone, but on a larger level to hopefully allow people to hear our voices, because as I said earlier, I know there are a lot of people that are connected to either one or both of us that probably will appreciate the conversation. And for everyone else to just, if you come away with nothing else, understand that your life really is what you make of it. As cliche as that sounds, don't overthink it. Take the cliches for a reason, Yeah, and and we're all in this together, and take this conversation as proof is that you can connect to somebody that you've looked up to and apply what you learned to improve your own life. And I want you to take this away from the conversation, Kevin, is that the things that I have learned from you and has really had a profound positive impact on my life. And I think that as that radiates out to any of the other things that I do, whether it be this podcast or sharing music or my own writing or speaking or just my personal relationships, my health, the people that I see most often, that they're seeing a better version of me. We've already talked about the kids. So I guess I offer that to you and to anybody else that's listening, to take the idea, never diminish the idea of how much of a difference that you can make. Because just by finding you, Kevin, and following along and then making the decision to try to make the changes for myself, it's hard to it's hard to wrap your head around how many people that might touch. And,
absolutely.
That's a heck of a thing to think about, I think. And I hope you feel good about that.
I do feel good. I mean, it's regardless of anything else, I think everyone has to make a living in this life, but if it wasn't for the positive effect and the positive feedback that I get from people like yourself, or through the, I'm not sure how, because it's a pretty, the subject matter, if you weren't getting the positive feedback, it'd be hard to sort of continue it week after week. But week after week, you just hear about people who, have made changes, like yourself. You're at your first year, and that's a great feeling. I remember the first year, and it was just so. It wasn't the milestone, but it is the milestone. I mean, let's face it, it's a great feeling to get to that milestone. But if it wasn't for the positive feedback, I think it would have been gone a long time ago. But yeah, I appreciate it.
You can find Kevin at alcoholmastery.com or on the YouTube channel Alcohol Mastery TV. All kinds of great resources there. His books are available with online retailers everywhere, and his video course is available on his website and at udemy.com. I want to sincerely thank Kevin again for taking the time to be a part of this podcast. For me, it was really like getting to visit with one of my guardian angels. I hope and expect that he and I will team up for something else at some point down the road. As for me, I'd love for you to join me online at kevinbulmer.com or on my brand new site. It's called ChooseHopeLiveBetter.com. Check that out. You can also find me on Facebook or Twitter. Just look for No Schedule Man and you'll find us. I'd love to hear from you, so drop us a comment there or on YouTube or SoundCloud. Take a moment to subscribe to this podcast at iTunes for more great personal development stories. Grow together. Thanks again for taking the time to listen, and we'll catch you next time on the No Schedule Man podcast.
Just a little deja vu.